Folktales. A folktale is a story that has been handed down over many generations. So what is a folktale? It's an oral story that's passed down from generation to generation. Oral story means that someone told it to someone else and kept telling the story over and over again. They didn't have an actual book. They just told the story to each other. Oral stories that were later written down. So a folktale is a story that's passed down from generation to generation, usually by people who are sharing the story orally with someone else, usually children. Later, those stories were then written down. It may have some type of magic. Not all folktales have magic, though. Sometimes there are animals that act like people. Usually good wins over evil. And most folktales teach some type of lesson. We're meant to learn something from a folktale.
Today we will learn what is a folktale. A folktale is a fictional story that has been passed down from person to person for many years. Sometimes there are many different versions of a folktale. You may have read these folktales before. Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and the Three Little Pigs. Most folktales usually have animals that act like real people, a lesson or moral, and a problem that gets solved in the end. Folktales can come from all over the world. There are African folktales, Chinese folktales, Native American folktales, and even Latin folktales. Now that you know a bit more about folktales, let's read one. A Nancy and the Magic Stick, written by Eric A. Kimmel, illustrated by Janet Stevens.
So folktales are a short story that come from oral tradition. Usually, many times the characters are animals with human characteristics, like personification. Some examples of folktales are The Three Little Pigs, Hansel and Gretel, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Town Mouse, Country Mouse, Paul Bunyan. What are the different types of folktales? There are actually many different types of folktales. We're going to learn about three. The first one is a fairy tale. A fairy tale features magical and enchanted forests. They have a happily ever after ending, and usually good is rewarded and evil is punished. Another type of folktale that we're going to learn about are fables. Fables are a very short story. It usually teaches a lesson or a moral. In most fables, the characters are animals. The last one is trickster tales. Trickster tales usually have a clever animal or person who plays a trick on someone else. Usually the trickster is clever, greedy, or devious. The trickster is usually punished. The plot moves fast and the ending comes very quickly. There's usually a moral or lesson to be learned in a trickster tale. Let's talk a little bit about fairy tales. Fairy tales usually have some type of magic. There's good versus evil, and good wins in the end. Most fairy tales begin with once upon a time. Usually they end with happily ever after. Let's talk a little bit about fables. It's usually a very short story. The characters are usually animals. It teaches a moral or a lesson. Aesop's fables are the most well known. Now let's talk about trickster tales. One animal usually gets tricked by another. One animal is usually lazy. Animals talk and act like people. Spiders and coyotes are popular tricksters. So, do you think you know a little bit about folktales now? Let's find out. We're going to read the story and decide what kind of folktale it is. Here we go. Fox wants to eat a pig for dinner. Pig tells Fox that he is too thin to eat and that Fox needs to fatten him up. Fox agrees because he wants a fat pig. Fox cooks spaghetti and pancakes and cookies for Pig. Fox cooks so much that he's exhausted. Fox takes a nap while Pig sneaks away. Pig is full and happy. What kind of folktale is this? It's a trickster tale. Remember, a trickster tale, there's usually a clever animal who plays tricks on other people. In the short story we just read, the pig was the trickster tale. What kind of folktale is this? Hare challenges Tortoise to a race. Hare knows he will win because he is the fastest animal around. But when he decides to take a nap, since he is so far ahead, Tortoise takes the lead and wins the race. Hare learns that being fast is not always best. What kind of folktale was this? It was a fable. Remember, fables are short stories that teach a lesson or a moral, and usually in most fables, the characters are animals. Let's find out what kind of folktale this is. Jack plants some magic bean seeds. The seeds grow into a beanstalk that leads up to the clouds. When Jack climbs it, he finds a giant, a magic harp, and a hen that lays gold eggs. What kind of folktale was this? It was a fairy tale. Remember, fairy tales feature magical and enchanted forces. They have a happily ever after ending, and good is rewarded and evil is punished. Well, I hope you've learned a little bit about folktales and you're ready to dive even deeper to learn more.